Hello, I'm Steph from My Driver Classic, and today I'm showing you a car that I've been dying to get my hands on for absolutely ages. It's this cracking Sunbeam Rapier. Now for me, Roots Group cars of this era are just always really well put together. They're lovely to drive, they're always marvellous to look at, and they've all been put together quite well. But the thing is, with only just over 15,000 of these ever made, it's been rather a tall task to get some keys to hand. And so I gave Great British Car Journey a call because I knew that they had one on their test fleet, and they said, yeah, of course you can. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to have a look around the outside, and if you've never seen one of these before, don't worry, we look under the bonnet, we look in the boot, we go through all the controls, and we even take it out for a test drive. So with so few left on the road, it's quite an honour to be taking this one out today. And if you want to test it yourself, we're going to talk about that later on in the video. So come on, I'll tell you some history. The name Rapier was used under two guises. From the mid-50s until the mid-70s was when it was used overall. But first of all, it was used on the series cars, of which this fits into as a Series 3, and then from the mid to late 60s as part of the Arrow cars range. Now, Roots had a number of names under their umbrella, and instead of doing a British Leyland like they did in the 70s, where they essentially stole sales from themselves, Roots tended to use the opportunity of various brands to do things like build shared platforms, cross-brand technology, and make canny investments which could benefit more than one name or model. Now, Roots recognised that the Minx was their safe saloon, essentially. It was a steady choice for families, and really it was, a steady. But what about the customer who wanted a bit more spice in their life, wind beneath their wings, but still needed that saloon benefit? Well, that's where the Rapier comes in. Now, I am hopeful that I'm going to be able to get a Series 1 and a Series 2 at some point, so I'm going to largely skip over that development and come back to it when we get hold of those cars. And if you've got one, drop me an email. But essentially, the Rapier offered something far more exciting than the Minx, of which it initially shared an engine with in that early series. Now, as I mentioned later on in this video, Roots, like many American names, updated their models every few years. So we quickly go from the Rapier launch in the mid-50s to the Series 3 we're testing here today, which launched in the autumn of 1959. The convertible we're testing here today, by the way, because people sometimes ask me this, was priced at £735 at launch, minus the purchase tax and extras. And I believe there were just over 15,000 of these cars produced. It's something around the 15,300 mark, which is quite good going for a 2-year production run. Now, we spoke of the Rapier offering something a little bit more exhilarating than the Minx, but many today will see these at shows and not realise that they had an incredible rallying history and a really successful one to boot. Now, at the time of this car being sold in 1960, Roots were riding high with this car because it was crowned #1 British car at Monte Carlo, not for the first, not for the second, but for the 3rd year running. And it was also #1 British car at the Alpine Rally. The car is fitted with the engine from the Alpine, the Sunbeam Alpine. And if you read brochures, the engine is dubbed the Rally Master. And essentially, it was designed to play up to that rallying finesse of the car. And it was said to give a lively sports performance, but with the added benefit of reliability and economy. But what does that actually mean? Because brands sometimes say this and don't really explain. Well, to break it down for you, it's got the 1500 engine in and it gives 73 brake horsepower, well, when new, and a whopping top speed of over 90 miles per hour. Now, I know that a lot of people today will say, Steph, that's not amazing. But look, let's give it some context to the era. Motorways had only just begun to appear at the end of the 50s. So for the vast majority of owners of these cars in Great Britain, this power essentially gave them exhilarating performance far surpassing what was needed for Britain's network of windy small roads. Interestingly, they made some clever changes to the engine though, including fitting an 8-port aluminium head with an increased compression ratio, a new sportier camshaft was fitted, and they also had the redesigned valves as well. But they didn't stop there because the gearbox also benefited from some tweaks, and changes were made which gave higher ratios on 2nd, 3rd and 4th gear, and they also reduced the angle of the gear lever movement, which essentially means shorter lever travel and snappier changes. Now, you're going to see later on our test drive that it even counts even at those lower and slower speeds. But look, it was probably enormously beneficial when rallying or racing as well. Now, Roots recognised that power and speed needs other bits and pieces as well. It's not just about the engine and gearbox. And they also did some canny changes on the suspension. So they fitted the car with fully independent front suspension with new large capacity telescopic shock absorbers. The system, developed in a world where people constantly greasing this, that and the other, was designed to be easy care and highly efficient. So again, they're not just saying you're going to get great performance, they're also saying you're going to spend less time on your back trying to sort everything out. Now, I know that a lot of you will have never seen one of these before, so I thought I'd give you a bit of an indication on the size. And it's pretty good size, actually. So it's 13 foot 6.5 inches long and 5 foot and half an inch wide. Now, in modern money, because I know not all of you work in feet and inches, that's roughly about 4.1 metres by 1.5 metres. Now, good things never last for long, and after being introduced in the autumn of 1959, the car was then replaced with the Series 3A in 1961. And spoiler, the success didn't stop there, because they sold more of the Series 3A than they sold of the Series 3. What I really like about Roots Group cars is that every couple of years they take them and they say, right, we're going to update it for the next series or for the next model. And when they got into this, they said, right, we're going to make quite a few little changes. But what happens is they all add up and it creates quite an impressive, more modern looking car. And in my opinion, more luxurious as well. So you probably notice some of the external changes if you've ever seen an earlier Rapier. Things like that front grille, you get the slats changed, and then at the back it slightly changes where the number plate is incorporated into the boot lid. And coming inside, you see some of these changes as well. So looking straight at the front screen, well, this is probably one of your biggest. So if you look, you've got these pillars here and you've got the front scuttle. Now if you look at an earlier car, it's slightly bigger, and what they did was they modified all this section, and this gave you 20% more visibility through the front screen, which is blooming good going, and it makes a massive change from one to the next. Now coming inside, if you've ever looked at the earlier series, you'll notice that the dash feels a lot more Spartan. Coming into this, you start seeing them use this walnut, I think the official name is walnut veneer trim. But as you can see, it adds just a bit of luxury to the car, and it just makes it look rather special. It brings it away from that almost post-war look of things being quite utilitarian and using as little material as possible. So we've got this dash. Well, what have we got? Well, first of all, we've got this glove box, and it is enormous. I didn't expect to see quite so much space inside there. Do the bit of WD-40 or Bulldog BDX on those hinges. Now coming into the centre here, you've got quite an impressive array of gauges and pull switches, but what are they all doing? Well, first of all, you've got your temperature gauge, and my goodness, that is so handy on an older car. You've got your fuel gauge, you've got your oil, and you've got your amp meter there as well. So they head up the middle section there. Coming down from there, you've got your panel lights, you've got your choke, got your key, got cigar lighter. Very neat and all in keeping as well, just the way that this is all styled up. And it's worth mentioning as well that if you've ever seen an earlier Rapier, you'll know that these used to be in kind of that white bakelite material, whereas in this they bring it into black. Again, it just makes it look more classy, more, I don't know, luxe. It's really nice. Coming over from there, you've got your lights on pull there, side and head. You've got your dip on the floor, and then coming down from there, you've got this little panel built in. So you've got your heater controls either side. You've got a Smith's clock to the middle, and then you've got just some extra storage space here. Now you might be wondering what that could have been used for. Well, you could have bought yourself a radio to pop in there, but in this one it hasn't been paid for, so it's just an empty space here. But again, it doesn't feel like it's missing anything. It just feels like a nice space that you can maybe put your gloves or a tobacco tin, things like that. And then coming down from there, very well timed, you've got a rather sumptuous sized ashtray, which looks to have been used at some point. Coming in front of us again, this neat uniform layout continues, and sometimes you get in cars and you look at the layout of the gauges or the switches and you just feel like everything's very plonked in, whereas in this it all feels very nicely laid out and thought about. So over to your left hand side, you've got your speedo, And on your right hand side, you've got your rev counter. Now, we talked about the rallying history in the car and its successes when we were walking around. So I wasn't really surprised to see a rev counter in here. Coming over from there, you've got fog light, you've got your wipers, and you've also got this. Now, I couldn't work out what this was, this LR pull, but it is actually your electric washers. I'm not sure if that would have always been electric, but that's what it's doing now. And that is pretty much everything. You've got your steering wheel centre, and rather bizarrely, and this must be a hangover from bench seats, you've got your handbrake down on the right hand side, because I got in and I started looking for an umbrella handbrake and I couldn't find it, and then I found it down over here. It's 4 forward gears on this, no synchro on first, which is exactly as you would expect, and you could have paid extra. I think the two big extras that they pushed at the time were white wall tyres and overdrive on third and fourth. Now, that hasn't been fitted in this, so it's just standard with no synchro on first and then synchro on second, third and fourth. But what's it sound like? Well, I was telling you it's got that 1500 engine in, and I was talking to you about the changes that they'd made on it. My goodness, where have I put the keys? Right, I might have to just put you on hold there while I find the keys. Oh no, here we go. This engine sounds really well, by the way. I mean, it always helps, I think, when classics are driven regularly, because it just helps you keep on top of things. They don't like standing around. I've used a little bit of choke this morning, but we'll give her a little bit. It's quite a chilly morning. Now, we are going to take her for a drive, but have a listen from the back before we get going. Right, let's go on an adventure. And that brings you up through the box into that fourth gear. And it's like many cars of the era, it's very quick to get up into top gear. Now, as you come around this roundabout, just look how easy and light this steering is. A lot of people are under this misconception that stuff of this era is incredibly tiresome and weighty to drive, but as you can see here, I'm barely having to do much at all to get the wheel to come round. Oh, this is just, it's a lot nicer than I expected. I came into the test actually with no real preconceived ideas. I knew I'd probably like it because it's Roots, and I tend to really gravitate towards that Roots stuff when I've got a choice. Not that I can afford it, so I don't own anything from Roots Group, but it's surpassed what I thought it would be like. It feels a lot more modern in terms of your handling, so everything feels very precise for the era. Quite often you get in cars of this era and everything can feel just a little bit vague, but this is so spot on. You can see why people would have picked these to go rallying in, because even the smallest turn of the wheel gives you a positive response. Now, in terms of your driver comfort, I would say this for me is up there with that Humber Sceptre as one of my favourite cars of 2023. The seats are so comfortable, there's so much room around you. Because of this increased visibility on the windscreen, you can see everything as well, because these pillars are almost pencil thin. So just everything is visible to you, and you get immediate driver confidence in a way that I just don't think you get with modern cars. You have to rely on all the technology to get it. Now, I realise this test route is slightly sedate. This is one of those cars that I wish that I could take out on the open road, and if I'm honest, absolutely rag it, because it feels like a car that has so much more to give than what I'm doing right now. Oh, I love it. So your seats are comfy, your handling is great, your visibility is absolutely spot on, and as someone who's a bit shorter, I'm only 5'3", finding it so easy to drive. And you will have seen under the bonnet when we looked around, plenty of room around that engine, so it's easy to work on. But what isn't working for this car? Well, number one is you can probably hear what isn't working for me, and it's just a little bit noisier than I would like it to be. And I suspect it's this roof, because due to the age of the vehicle, the roof just doesn't fit as well as, say, something a little bit more modern might do. You've got all this gap round here. But look, I'm really having to pick fault with this car. I also want to say as well that the gear change is really nice. You can really feel that whether it's the original gearbox or been rebuilt, because I don't know, it's really been looked after, because sometimes you get in stuff in this era and when the gearbox hasn't been looked after or it's been ragged through, it all starts feeling like just, well, stirring a pudding mix. But this is, again, just like that steering, is absolutely bang on. And realistically, it's quite a short way to do it, but I can't think what more else to tell you really. I'm really taken aback by this. This hadn't been on my list of cars that I would have liked to have owned. It's really surpassed me in terms of just not being something that's been on my radar. But now that I'm out in it, I'm really, really enjoying it in a way that I should have really expected, knowing what I'm like with Roots cars. Now, the other thing I will say is if you are going for one of these and you are going for this particular series, be aware that this is probably more practical for many people than the earlier cars, because not only have you got that uprated engine which I was talking about and all the differences that all the upgrades that they made to it, you've also got disc brakes to the front on this, which means that when you come to stop, and I'm not going to demonstrate it because the brakes are so sharp in this, the car just pulls up straight away. And for me, that makes it an attractive proposition for taking out in modern traffic and having to deal with modern drivers and how awful they are in looking ahead. Now, usually I say to you all something along the lines of, oh, I wish you were here, or I wish you could try this car. But here's the thing, with this car, you actually can try it, because I've borrowed this from the Great British Car Journey. Now, the Great British Car Journey are based in Derbyshire, and it's essentially a really nice little museum. And if you haven't been, you definitely should do. And the cars, what happens is you come in the front of the museum, and it starts with the Austin 7s and all the old stuff, and the stuff that I'm sort of really finding that I'm starting to quite get into. And then it goes right through to more modern stuff. There's a Mondeo in there, there's Princess Anne's Reliant Scimitar, there's all sorts. But it just goes right through the story of British motoring. And as part of it, they've got this little add-on called Drive Dad's Car. I didn't really know what it was before I first came. And essentially, and I always think it's incredible that they do it, they have a fleet of cars which you can hire, and what they do is you take it out for a drive around their little test route, and you get to experience the car firsthand. They've got everything from Reliant Robins, they've got a Morris Minor Million. I mean, you can tell those are some of my favourites. This particular car is on the fleet, so if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, I'd quite like to go in that, you can slide your bum in and have a go. It is so fun and it's so good. And the thing is it's very rare. I don't think there's anywhere else that really does it. And I quite like the fact that they do it, because I'm always moaning that people don't do enough to keep classics alive. And in many ways, the attraction is doing just that. So if you are fancying a bit of a day out this year, so I guess, is it this year? Are we in 2024 yet? I don't know. But if you are watching it in 2024, add this to your diary of things to do. It's a good day out. You can bring kids. You can try the cars, although I would suggest booking in advance, and it's quite centrally located as well. So sadly, I'm going to have to give this back so that other people can drive it, which actually makes me really sad, because I've enjoyed this one immensely. From the gear change, to the driving experience, to the handling, to the look of the thing. There's really not much had changed, probably just sort out some of those rattles. So thank you very much to the Great British Car Journey and Drive Dad's Car team for letting me drive this. If you want to go yourself, or you want to see what else you can drive, all the details are in the description box below. But until next time, when we're out in something very different once again, take care and drive safely.